We have new episodes dropping every other week. You can find them early on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, or wherever you find your podcasts, or find the link below for our Megaphone landing page, and we will see you around the campfire. Hey, it's Paul.
Hey, it's Jess.
Welcome to Campfire Ashes. Now pull up a log. Let me tell you a story. Mark zipped up his backpack. He had all the supplies he needed for the night and his route planned. The only thing left to do is to fight the urge to yell parkour whenever he cleared a wall or got over a roof. His friends dared him that he couldn't do it, and I think particularly because he was the only one with athletics in his group, and partially because they didn't want to try it themselves. He was the one. The curiosity was always there. When you grow up anywhere near the quarter, you hear the stories, the legends, the missing people, and the Ursulines convent, 3rd floor. He walked with his head down, his hood up, as he walked along the French Quarter and past Latrobe Park. Thankfully, this wasn't Bourbon Street. It's still a tourist area, but there are plenty of breaks in the foot traffic, and he walked away from the river. And the only thing he had to worry about were the paranoid tourists. Not the ones that you drink and take in the sights, but the ones that took those weird nighttime stakeout tours looking for haunted things around the city. If they were around, he'd never be able to make it to the 2nd floor window and sneak in without being seen. But he got to his destination, tried to be as inconspicuous near the wall. The streets were really quiet around 3 a.m. When he was sure no one was nearby, he took a running start, secured a foot along the beveling, and grabbed the ledge, and used his momentum to swing over the wall and managed to get a leg up. He hoisted himself, and with a roll, landed on his feet, and looked around and whispered, "Parkour." He couldn't resist. Now that was the hard part. He quietly snaked around through the courtyard, bush mazes, trying to stay low to avoid anybody who might be up for a late night stroll. He shimmied up the drain pipe using the decorative beveling as leverage, and then he made it onto the 2nd floor ledge and scooted as quickly as he could onto the balcony. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he dropped to the floor and looked around the street. They were quiet, so he was pretty sure that he made it up without anybody noticing. And since he wasn't being tackled right now, he was certain that there wasn't any security alerted either. But he opened up his bag, and he pulled out the lockpick set that he managed to get off Amazon. He still laughed himself that Bezos would really sell anything for $1, and it took him way longer than he expected to get in the lock, because the lock was older, and a lot of the ones he tried, in addition to his adrenaline being running, and made his hands very, very shaky. However, he finally heard a click, and the lock fell open. He reached into his bag and pulled out some WD-40, and wasted no time emptying the entire bottle, hosing down the hinges, and waited a few minutes for it to do its magic and make sure the lubrication did its job. He waited a few minutes, staying low, and a few partiers stumbled down the street, but they were unaware of him. Once he was sure, he slowly opened the hurricane shutter. He pumped his fist when it didn't make a sound, and he tested the balcony's doors, and they were unlocked. He assumed people couldn't get through these shutters, so there's no reason to lock the inner doors as well, and he was finally in. He had been on the tours, and the general idea of where he needed to go. He was quiet, stepping very lightly to avoid the random creaks in an old building, and before long, there they were. The stairs to the 3rd floor. A long hallway stretched out, and mostly uniformed doors, but towards the end of the hallway were the odd doors that seemed to catch everyone's eye and imagination. These rooms had Dutch doors with small latched openings. They seemed more like cell doors than regular doors. And he quietly searched each room. Most of them were empty with general signs of water damage. The city hasn't been able to get the building fixed yet because of some of the damage from Katrina that had done to New Orleans. But lucky for the sisters, this is one of the higher points of the city, and they were spared the major flooding. As his mind started to wander, thinking about what might have been up there, there had always been rumors for as long as the city has been around. But now that he was there, his mind was really starting to wander. It didn't even occur to him that he wasn't alone when he was tapped on the shoulder. He spun around widely, putting his hands to his mouth, trying to stifle the scream, but then he threw up his hands ready to fight, and a young, smirking nun took a step back and pressed her fingers to her lips. He was screwed. Find what you're looking for? Are you going to get me arrested? She smirked again. I would have called the police a half hour when I saw you coming up the stairs. He finally let his guard down. There just hasn't been any stuff up here anymore. It's mainly storage. She gestured through the hallway. You've interrupted my me time. You stay up here? Well, it's quiet up here, and I think I can just be me or myself. I can watch people through the streets, through the cracks in the shutters. So how often do people break in like me? Like, you seem to be very matter-of-fact about the whole thing. Well, only a couple times a year. Most of the time they get caught in the courtyard. I think you're the first one that's gotten inside the convent in a very long time. Well, since I'm here, is there anything cool up here? Like, I was planning on swiping a book or something to show my friends that I actually, like, made it in. And she thought for a minute and then lit up. I have just the thing. Follow me. You follow her to one of the Dutch doors and opened the rooms and walked towards the window. She pointed to the shutter, and you noticed a large nail jutting out. How about one of the last fame blessed nails from the Pope? You're kidding me. He rushed to the doors and touched it and played with it a little bit. Are you saying, like, these things are real? Well, there aren't many left. A few might be left in each one of the windows, and there's only one left in this particular window. How do I get it out? Well, it's so old. If you can find a hammer, you can probably just pull it through the old wood. And he immediately reached into his backpack and pulled out a hammer. He really did have something for everything. He spent a little time working on it with the teeth of the hammer, but after about 15 minutes of him pulling without really trying to, like, make too much noise, the nail came loose, and he marveled at the nail. It was a piece of history and superstition, and it was his. The boys were never going to believe that he got one of those nails. And he turned, smiling ear to ear as he pushed the shutter open a little bit to let in some of the moonlight. I can never repay you. And a thin sliver of moonlight fell into the room, and she stood there, smiled briefly, looking past him at the light. The smirk was gone. It was just a big, satisfied smile and a pair of very sharp fangs. Oh, I think you've done enough for me. Thank you.
Ruh-roh. Just talk. I can't form thoughts. I'm scared.
It's okay. Well, this is the legend of the Casket Girls of New Orleans and the Ursuline Convent, which is the basis for a lot of the vampire stories in New Orleans and the Mississippi basin in general.
Would it really be a spooky season type of tale if it wasn't in New Orleans?
Well, yeah, I figured, like, again, I wanted something. So the Ursuline Convent, for one, still exists. Like, it is still very much real. It is still very much there, and you can actually, like, go on tours and stuff like that.
Is it still, like, running as a convent?
I don't think it is. I think they moved their operations to other places, so it's much more of a museum than anything else.
Okay, that makes me feel a little less scary.
Which should have tipped off Mark.
Yeah, but no.
Okay, so the Ursuline
immediately make me uncomfortable, so I don't know why Mark wasn't immediately uncomfortable.
I was a Catholic school kid, so yeah.
Nope. I don't know how you survived that. I could not.
I don't know. I did 9 years.
Nope, couldn't do it. My grandma.
K through 8.
My grandma was a Catholic school girl, and every story she tells me, I'm like, why did your mother do this to you?
Oh yeah, it was horrific. It was not fun for a non-Catholic kid to go to a Catholic school. If you want to learn what prejudice is at a very early time, do that. Don't do that. Seriously, please, God, don't send your non-Catholic kid to a Catholic school. It doesn't end well. But anyway, this is the story of the Casket Girls. So the Casket Girls, once the French were really kind of ramping up their population of New Orleans and making it into a big town, Casket Girls were basically mail-order brides from France.
Oh, I don't like that.
And they didn't actually have caskets. It's actually the word is cassette or cassette.
I don't know. I think it'd be pretty cool if I came with my own casket, but I'm a spooky bitch.
So they were just large suitcases. Like think of the suitcases from the movie Titanic with Rose, like those big ass
Like the trunk?
yeah, basically like
Are they
trunks.
shoving them in the trunk?
No, they're not shoving them in the trunk. They're just bringing like stuff with them. Like it's basically like each of them would come out with their own very uniform trunks. Like
Okay,
they're
because that is not the image that was painted in my brain.
yeah, no. No.
The image
it's
in
like,
my brain was like, hey, surprise, you got a delivery, and it's this lady inside of a box that may or may not be alive.
no. And
Happy
realistically
wedding day.
and realistically they weren't even that big. They were probably just like very large satchels or very like large boxes that they either carried or like drug behind them. But because of the legends and the mispronunciation of words, it became casket. Like cassette just kind of slowly morphed into casket. Kind of like you know what woodchucks are, which are groundhogs.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bastardization of Native American language, where I think one of the tribes call them Wookutch. Like Wookutch is like the actual word, but like we are just like, I heard woodchuck, and that's what that's what we're gonna have it. So it's like woodchucks. Yeah, like cowboy is caballero in Spanish. So like people heard caballero, cowboy. Yeah, cowboy. Got it. So that's kind of how like this is. The cassette girls ended up becoming casket girls. Because it was always weird. It's amazing how just a mispronunciation of something spirals into some other like craziness. So basically what happened is the original cassette girls were mail orders. They would come into to New Orleans to start a new life with in the Americas and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. Like it's a weird thing. Like they were always looking for domestic partners, but the ones that didn't ended up at the Ursuline convent because it was basically like, hey, you're not the Marian type. Well, you're a nun now.
Well, what? Oh, who are you to decide?
It's the 1700s. This is the 1700s. They don't care.
Yo, I wouldn't last.
No, you probably wouldn't.
I am way too confrontational. I would have been burned at the stake for less. Then again, you know, if I was like born and raised in the 1700s, I would have absolutely no self-esteem. So, or rights for that matter. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. So basically, the Bishop of Quebec was appealing to Louis the Fourth to bring people over, and basically they were looking for virtuous women from the for convents to be good candidates for marriage. So the casket girls were contracted to be wives of the men in the colonies. But I mean, like even though we have like the 90-day weddings and all that kind of stuff, like it's the same thing. It just doesn't work well. Like consignment of women didn't work even in the 1700s. These women were miserable. They weren't happy, and just weren't. They just weren't happy. But
well,
so here,
being forced into marriage?
They wouldn't be. But here is where the story becomes vampire-ish. If you lived in New Orleans for any period of time, working in the colonies and everything like that, New Orleans is a tropical area. So the heat, and the temperatures, and the sunlight. Everybody has like darker skin, like you're walking around year-long tans, all that kind of stuff. So when these ships were coming in and the women got off the ships and they were pale or ghostly white because they were second-class citizens to begin with, because they're women in those times, they were typically held below deck, so they didn't get a ton of sunlight. Right. They didn't get a ton of food, so they tended to be more gaunt and more thin coming out of the boats. So if you see thin, gaunt, translucent women walking around, the stories start to happen.
I would see exactly where they'd get that from.
Mm-hmm. So
I respect it.
So that's basically how it happened. So New Orleans was an outpost in the 1700s, and whenever they did happen to marry these people, since they're going for outposts and fishing and shipping, like the cast girls just weren't around. Like they were there, but like their husbands weren't. So everybody, like, they had to kind of keep to themselves. So they would always keep to themselves and always talk to themselves because, like, they knew each other. They'd been on a boat for like weeks at a time, coming to the New World. So that also led more to the, well, why are they all together kind of stories.
Right. Like a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Or cults were really a thing.
Yes, it becomes a cult.
Girl gang.
Yes. So those who didn't marry off and everything like that were moved to the Ursuline Convent. And for those who don't know, the Ursuline Convent has been it is the oldest standing building in the Mississippi Valley area. This was built in the 1700s? Yes. 1700s, and it's still there. Like, you can go visit this. And it's still a beautiful place. It's a beautiful looking place. It has a small hedge maze. Like, it's a really interesting, beautiful location. Highly suggest going just to go. Obviously, if you like the area and all that kind of stuff. But the nuns were always there. They were always in that area to add to the whole vampire aspect of them obviously being translucent, gaunt women. In the War of 1812, the convent served as a makeshift hospital for the wounded of the battles and all that kind of stuff. So what happens in a triage hospital? Some people die. So some people die. Well, maybe they didn't die of natural causes.
I mean, valid.
Yeah, so basically that started to start reinforcing that, like, oh, if you went to the Ursuline Convent, you probably didn't make it out alive. And it wasn't because they were like vampires, it was because they got shot. they got shot and bled out.
Bad rep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that also
blame the women.
Yeah. And also
Blame
obviously
the
that
women because having to be the men.
but obviously like that adds to it because it just became a thing. There were also outbreaks of yellow fever, which also thinned out some of the people in the outposts and all that kind of stuff. So of course there's also ghost stories of the Ursuline Convent. It's a very haunted place for some. So the legends are that the casket girls were basically put on the third floor. The third floor is where the housing of these places were, and if you look at some of the locations, like there's very weird indents in the floor. It looks like they're cut out in rectangular shapes, and if you were there, it kind of looked like, hey, this would be a really, really convenient place to put a bunch of coffins. So, like, if you were to go there and see these rooms, they would have these cutouts in the floor that very much look like you could put a coffin right into these indents. And it looks like, well, that's their beds. They don't need beds, they need coffins.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically a lot of, obviously a lot of superstition,
Speculation?
a
Yeah.
lot of speculation, and
Like
all that
nosy
kind of
ass
stuff.
people making their own assumptions. These girls are just getting uprooted from their whole ass lives, being forced to live here. Like, leave them alone.
Also, the third floor tend to have, or also have shutters, like very very thick shutters that don't have slits in them, like your verandas and all that kind of stuff. Like when you think of a window shutter, you think of a shutter that folds in on itself, but it also has like those wooden slats so you can look out of. You know what I'm talking about?
Right, yeah. I
Yeah.
know what you're saying.
Third floor didn't have any of that. Third floor was just solid wood
Wow.
shutters. And of course, it's just because they're hurricane shutters. They're hurricane shutters. That's all.
Okay.
That's literally all they are. However,
I know it's
that
Louisiana,
adds.
so it makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. But that also adds to the, well, they don't want the sunlight to hit them because vampires. Yeah, it's
Leave
basically
yourself alone.
it's basically just a lot of supposition of like, oh well, they talk to each other. Witches. What? They don't need sunlight? Vampires. So yeah, a lot of this kind of stuff happens, but apparently, the Pope has made trips to New Orleans. But like, when you talk about the stories of the Ursuline convent, I mean, they always visit that area because it's old. So the idea is that the Pope blessed nails that were used to shut the hurricane shutters in place, because there was no necessarily real reason for people to be up there, so they didn't really need hinges on their on the hurricane shutters, because the convent itself is actually higher than most of New Orleans as far as that. So like, it really, like during Katrina, it's one of the places that was safe from floodwaters because it was
Right.
higher up on the bowl than other places.
So him, blessing nails put into the shutters was just, the Pope doing a holy thing because it's, it's an ancient like relic basically at this point. But everybody's taking that and running with it as though like, oh my God, the Pope is like, this place is haunted, got to seal stuff in.
So by the 1800s, they stopped calling them the cassette girls and started calling them the casket girls. So the thought process is the caskets that they brought with them did not house their clothes, but housed Eastern European vampires.
So like kind of what I thought, in the sense of I thought a body came in there. But it's the body of a vampire and not the body of the lady attached to the casket. Okay.
So many believe that that the vampires can fly and wanted to return their caskets on the convent's third floor, which is why the windows have been permanently sealed with 800 screws made of silver that was blessed by the Pope. And even Pope John Paul II re-blessed the screws during his 87 visit. However, obviously there's no documentation of any of that happened. But
I mean,
again,
I believe it.
Again, they're just nailed shut because they don't need to be opened, because nobody actually lives on the third floor anymore.
Unless that's what they want us to think, but I don't know. This one's a little. On the one hand, I'm like, okay, 1700s people making your assumptions, like leave these poor girls alone. But on the other hand, I'm like, unless that's what these girls wanted me to think.
There was a story that was once told in the 1970s where a couple ghost hunters kind of ditched a tour in the convent and hid in the courtyard with the intention of spending the night monitoring the third floor, and then morning came and their bodies were found completely drained of blood. And of course, this has never been confirmed by any, like, you can't find all of that there. but yeah, like the Ursuline convent has a lot of stuff as far as like ghost hunters and stuff, because anytime you have a building that is like I'll say 100 years old or more, but like this is like 300 years plus old. Like anytime you have a building that old, obviously there's going to be stories of ghosts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense, being that old.
Mm-hmm.
Still
there's
standing somehow, especially if it's hurricane. Like, I know it's higher up than like the flood zone, but still.
Yeah, it's higher up, and it's also like this thing is like extremely well built. Like this is not this is a massive place. It's gaudy because like I'm not trying to bash on Catholics, but like your buildings tend to be a little bit more gaudy and garish than other places. Like beautiful churches, but like unneeded stuff. So like in the story, like we talked about him gaining footing on beveling and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff exists. So like if you're trying to like parkour your way into this area, like they made it easy by having like not walls not like flush, like there is beveling on the walls and everything like that could give an athletic person the ability to get up onto those places. And then all of the decorative beveling on the actual thing could actually make it a little bit easier for you to scale the actual place to get onto the balcony and all that kind of stuff.
So did they want you to into this place? And like, well, maybe, issuing a challenge? Like, I would see that
they did.
As a challenge.
Maybe they did. It's the way to keep their vampires fed.
I mean, so that could be it. They could be like, okay, so if we do this, idiots will try to get in here and feed the vampires, and the vampires won't have to eat us.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. I'm just saying.
This is such a prevalent tale that there's actually a ballet called the Casket Girls that they've done in the area, and it's it's billed as a modern gothic vampire ballet. I don't know if they're still selling tickets, but like it became a thing.
We should totally go.
I mean, if we can find this, if this is going off somewhere, I would definitely go.
I mean, I'm always looking for an excuse to go to NOLA. I love it down there.
So yeah, that is the tale of the both the Casket Girls and the Ursuline convent, and how those two come together to give us New Orleans. So like obviously it's not the whole story, but it is one of the facets of the New Orleans vampires. And there's a ton of I mean, I could spend months of this podcast doing all of the lore and all of the supernatural things that New Orleans has to offer, because anytime you, again, just like any building that's been around for X number of years, if you have a location that's been around for 200 plus 300 plus years, there's stories. There's always going to be stories. There's always going to be legends and all that kind of stuff.
Could do a podcast about New Orleans hauntings alone.
Probably. Yeah, and it would be a very long time before you ran out of content.
Absolutely.
So that's basically it. So don't like, and the tours actually let you go up to the third floor. So like I tried to make the story as accurate as I could. So like those Dutch doors actually do exist, and that also fed into the stories of the vampires, because like you have all these regular doors and then you have Dutch doors, and these if it didn't like paint the picture, think of a door with a little mini door in it to where like you could open it and kind of slide stuff into the room.
Yeah, like that's what, like in the hospital.
Yeah.
Like that
So,
concept.
yeah, so like that's what the Dutch doors are. So you have everything is normal doors, and then you get to the third floor, and then you have Dutch doors in there where people are just like, why do you need a barrier between you when you're giving stuff to a person on the other side? So it's just like, oh, you need it so that way you didn't get bit by the vampires that they were housing in the third floor. So like, again, all these little things just kind of build on the legend of there being vampires in the Ursuline convent, which is also weird because it's like, typically vampires are not happy with crosses, and if you live in a convent, there's crosses everywhere in this place. Like there's
Imagine.
yeah, there's very decorative crosses on like every door, like so it would be a tough time for vampires. Like it wouldn't be a great place.
I mean, if they're not on the third floor, and they can supposedly, just fly without having to touch the other two floors, couldn't be the worst thing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. But that is the story of the Ursuline convent. It is, like I said, you can go there today, and it's still there. There are tours available that you can see. Those hurricane shutters are still very securely there, and it adds to that weird lore as like, why are those the only windows closed? But they're not. Like all of them have hurricane shutters and everything like that. But again, it's just these little things that everybody picks up on, and then it builds and builds and builds, and then 300 years later, oh yeah, vampires in New Orleans. It's just a thing that we know exists, when really it probably didn't. It probably didn't.
I don't know. I could believe it, but I believe in all that stuff. So
yeah. That's what I was trying to find, because there's so much lore on this. I was trying to find the place. So this building has been standing since 1751.
Oh damn.
Yeah. It survived a fire in 1788 because of the distance from the source of the fire, which was closer to Canal Street. So yeah, this is still a freestanding building since 1788. So like, it is the oldest building in the Mississippi River Valley. So, and of course that adds to the whole thing too, because like this monolith of French design has outlasted fires, outlasted floods. And like, why is it? Maybe supernatural.
Cough, cough.
Yeah, cough, cough. But yeah, guys, I hope you're liking it so far. We have 2 more stories for the month of October. We're trying to get these locations, and it's always a little bit different type of story, because we can add a little bit more realism into the story when we're trying to make these. And like I said, a lot of what I put into that, like, you can actually see from pictures within the rooms with the indents that are coffin shaped, like those exist. Those Dutch doors exist. The nailed closed hurricane shutters exist. All of this kind of stuff exists. So it just adds to the lore. Any last words?
No, I'm still very much, Mom, come pick me up, I'm scared. Vampire ladies. So
also, it was fun to get a vampire story. I know there's so many, like, that's another thing. Like, we could do vampire stories forever. Like, there's every culture really has vampire stories. So, but yeah, that is the New Orleans vampires and how that came to be. So, if you see a girl walking around with a casket, don't go to the 3rd floor with her.
No, you don't, Seer. No, you do not. Run away.
Yeah, run away. And remember, last one out douses the fire. If you heard something, no, you didn't. If you're here with us next time, it means you made it through the morning.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.